going to talk about something that I believe is really, really important, something I care deeply, deeply about. And the thing is that freedom is sometimes something you have to fight for. Sometimes some freedoms you're given, and some freedoms you have to take for yourself. Sometimes you have to stand up and say, you know what? This is not the way things are going to be. I'm going to do things differently. And that's incredibly, incredibly hard. So what I'm talking about today is how to be a rebel. And more specifically, how to be a rebel in the workplace. And that is incredibly, incredibly difficult. And we know why this is difficult from a set of experiments that were done first in the 1970s. They're called the Asch conformity experiments. And I want to show you just an excerpt from this video to show you how this goes and how we tend to conform with others. So please play the video.
But an experiment is not a public opinion poll. It examines behavior under the pressure of social forces, as the experiment of Solomon Asch reveals.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. As you can see here, I have a number of cards, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length. All right, we'll proceed in this order. You'll give your answer.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the fifth person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3.
But on the third trial, something happens.
2, 2, 2, 2, 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence. Asch found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
So 37% of the cases, they actually went along with something they could see was very clearly wrong. And this is in a psychological experiment where there's absolutely nothing at stake. Okay, they're paid $20 to participate. They get that money no matter what. What if it had been your job on the line? What if this had been a meeting and everybody in the meeting is saying something you clearly know to be wrong? The boss is there saying something you clearly know to be wrong. Then what? Then we tend to go along even more often. So there is this tendency to conform, conformity, the act of matching attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors to the group norm. And we tend to do that a lot. We do that all the time. We are social creatures. We do this in psychological experiments, and we do this all the time in the workplace. I talked to a department head at IBM. And at IBM, they have this forced ranking process. Annually, as a manager, you have to rank all of your people, all of your employees. And you have to specifically, very specifically, you have to make 25% of them top performers. They go into the A category. 50% are sort of in the middle, the B category. And 25% of your employees, you must rank in the bottom C category that says needs development. Putting people in the C category can have quite serious consequences. If as an employee you're put in the C category several times in a row, you may lose your job. I talked to this manager and he said, you know what? I can't do that. I have 8 amazing employees. They're all A category stuff. And he was told very clearly by upper management in this branch of IBM that either you do this or you're fired. And so he did it. And he felt terrible about it. And he had, extreme it really weighed on his conscience that he had done something that he knew to be wrong. But everybody does it. We tend to conform if we're not careful. And this is incredibly important in the context of freedom at work, because there can be no freedom if we conform. There can be no freedom if we're not free to speak up. There can be no freedom if we always go along with what everybody else is saying. It gets worse. The worst disaster in airline history happened in 1973 on the Spanish island of Tenerife, where two fully laden 747s crashed into each other on a foggy runway. There are many, many factors that contributed to this airline disaster. Over 550 people died that day. But the scariest thing, I was just reading the transcripts from the voice recorder. There was one plane was taxiing, you can see in this diagram. One plane was taxiing on the runway, the other one was at the runway ready to take off. And that was a KLM plane. And the captain of that KLM plane was their most famous captain. He was in the ads for the airline. He was head of training for the 747s. And he believes, from what he's heard on the radio, that he has clearance to take off. It's a foggy day, he can't see the runway, but he believes that he's heard that he has clearance to take off. So does the first officer. And on the voice recorder, you can hear the second officer lean in and say, "But is that Pan Am flight that was taxiing, is he really gone?" And the captain goes, "Yeah, sure." And they take off, and they hit that plane, and over 500 people died. There was somebody sitting in the cockpit of that KLM plane who could have averted that disaster if he had had the guts to speak up, if he had been free to disagree with authority. And when you hear it, you can hear the impatience in the captain's voice, and you can hear the uncertainty in the second officer's voice as he tries, but do we really have clearance to take off? Is that plane gone? And what's even scarier is you can hear from the Pan Am plane's voice recorder, you can hear their screams as the plane that 747 KLM appears out of the mist and hits them. Over 550 people died that day. In fact, today, as a result of this disaster, they actually teach the co-pilots to disagree with the captain. So if the co-pilot believes that the captain is making a wrong decision, if he's taking off without clearance, he's taught to speak up. And in extreme cases, he's taught to actually grab the throttle and stop the plane physically over the captain's objections. Similarly, nurses are taught to disagree with doctors because sometimes doctors will make wrong decisions. So the consequences of this can be extreme. Think about Enron. How many people at Enron must have known that what was going on was not only illegal, it was actually killing people, because they engineered these brownouts in California where people lost power, hospitals lost power, nursing homes lost air conditioning. People died as a result of this. How many people at Enron must have known this was going on, but ended up conforming because everybody else did it? We have to stop that. And there's a very important word that comes in here, and that word is no. We have got to free people to say no, free people up to say no in the workplace. And we, as individuals, have got to take our responsibility to say no when somebody's asking us to do something that we believe is wrong. And there's sort of, there's a sliding scale here of no. There's the no thank you, right? Yes, I know you invited me to that 2-hour meeting tomorrow. I've been to that meeting before. That meeting sucks. No decisions will ever be made. It'll just be a lot of people talking. I'm not going to that meeting. Thank you for inviting me, though. I know you invited me to that meeting at 7:30 tomorrow morning. You know what? I'm actually sending my kids off to school. I won't be going. No, thank you. There are there's a myriad of little things that we sort of expect people to do that are kind of dumb in the workplace. Dress codes. I think dress codes are eminently stupid. If your people can't figure out how to dress themselves, you have bigger problems. And I did see the dress code document for an Oracle consulting company, and it was a 25-page document that outlined how and when, how you could dress yourself and what kind of beards were okay and what kind of jewelry and makeup for women and that kind of thing. And in those cases, no thanks. That's perfectly fine. And sometimes so that's one end of the scale, and at the other end of the scale, there's the hell no. Okay, no, I won't lie to the customer. I know you want me to. I'm not going to. That would be wrong. No, I'm not going to do something that screws the customer over. Of course I'm not. No, I'm not going to do something that screws one of my coworkers over. I won't. Hell no. Or no, I won't do something that's illegal or immoral or wrong or something that conflicts with my values and my beliefs. Hell no, I won't. And what's kind of interesting is that I believe that If you miss your chance to say no thanks to some of the small, dumb things your workplace asks you to do, then it becomes more difficult to say hell no when that is warranted, when that is the right answer. So if you tend to go along with the small things, that will sort of erode your ability to say no to the big things that are wrong that they're asking you to do. And that's why I think it's really, really important that we can say no at work. And there's an individual responsibility so that each of us take responsibility for our own actions and choices and say yes to the things we want to say yes to and no to the things we say no to. If you can't say no, then your yes is meaningless. And there's an organizational responsibility to set people free to say no, to create the kind of workplace where it's okay to disagree, to create the kind of workplace where you are free to do what you believe is right. And no workplace is free unless we can do that. I do have one more video that I kind of want to show you, just to show you exactly how strong this power of conformity is. So roll this video.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Now, here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door, everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
So the power of conformity is incredibly strong, and if we're not careful, we just tend to go along with what others around us are saying, thinking, and doing. So how do you reverse this? I want to give you 5 very quick tips. And tip number 1 is very simple. Knowing about conformity reduces conformity. Okay? If you go into the Ash experiment, knowing about the conformity effect, you are not subject to that effect. So just by telling you guys about this, I've already made you a little less likely to conform. And you can tell others about this. You can share these videos with other people to make them aware of this bias, of this tendency to conform. And that will make them a little more likely to stick up for themselves instead of just going along. Tip number 2. It's interesting that every time we're faced with this risk, you know, the boss is asking me to take on this project. I'm really too busy, but, you know, I'm afraid of what it'll cost me if I say no. Ask yourself this question: what will I lose if I say yes? We're very rarely aware of the cost of going along. We're acutely aware of the cost of going against the grain, of going against orders. And maybe, you know, if I go along and I take on this project, I'll be way too busy. I might become stressed. I might become sick. I'll have less time with my kids and my family and my hobbies, my friends. And that's, weigh those two costs against each other. We're acutely aware of what we lose if we say no, but we rarely ask what we lose if we say yes. Tip number 3, celebrate your rebels. This is sort of as a workplace. If somebody says no to something, I believe that person is a goddamn hero. I believe that person should be celebrated inside of the workplace. This guy had a way too high workload. We asked him to do more, and he said no. What a hero! What a great guy! What an awesome thing to do. Celebrate those people who go against the grain. Or we asked this group over here to do something that was actually bad for the customer, and they said, hell no, we're not going to do it. What an awesome group. Could there be some way inside of your workplace to celebrate the people who have the guts to not just go along? Tip number 4, quit. So this is on the individual level. If you are in a workplace where you're repeatedly asked to do things that are bad, that are wrong, that are against your values, that you believe are stupid, get the hell out of there. They're probably not going to stop asking those things. And maybe there's another workplace for you out there where they wouldn't keep asking you to do stupid, wrong, illegal things. So get the hell out of there. Back to the power question, what would you do if you were not afraid? And a couple of people said, I quit, based on that question. And we want to help more people to quit, actually. So we created a website called internationalquityourcrappyjobday.com. You just missed it. International Quit Your Crappy Job Day was March 31st. But the website is still up. We're going to have it again next year. The website is still up with tons of videos and resources and inspiration and tips on how to quit your job. And there's even a test you can take and figure out if it's, is it time for me to quit? So maybe that's the way to get out of there. That's the solution to your problem, is to get out of that workplace. And the final, fifth and final tip is to find other rebels. They did an interesting variation of the Ash experiment, where there was, so the real test subject is in position number 5, and normally everybody else is giving the wrong answer. So they did a variation where just one other person was giving the right answer. Okay? So the majority is still giving the wrong answer, but just one other person gave the right answer. And that meant that, that instead of 37% of the test subjects giving the wrong answer, it was now only 5%. Only 5% gave the wrong answer. So if there's just one other person in your workplace who you can lean on, who will say no together with you, who will be a rebel together with you, maybe that will give you the freedom to say no. Maybe that will give you the courage so you don't have to do it alone. This guy is a real revolutionary. He fought for independence in Algeria. He's called Frantz Fanon. He was a doctor, wrote some very influential books on how to be a revolutionary. And here he talks about community. The colonialist bourgeoisie, so the powers, the white people in Algeria, had hammered into the natives, the locals' mind, the idea of a society of individuals where each person shuts himself up in his own subjectivity and whose only wealth is individual thought. And I think that's what we do in a lot of workplaces. A lot of workplaces actually pit coworkers against each other. We're fighting for promotions, we're fighting for bonuses, we're fighting for raises. It's me against you, it's not us against them. And that's what he says we need. Now, the native who has the opportunity to return to the people during the struggle for freedom will discover the falseness of this theory. The struggle will suggest to him a different vocabulary: brother, sister, friend. These are words outlawed by the colonialist bourgeoisie, because for them, my brother is my purse, my friend is part of my scheme for getting on. So if you can't find that other rebel in your workplace, maybe you can be the other rebel. Maybe you can be that person with the guts to stand up and say no, who will inspire other people to do the right thing. There can be no freedom without the freedom to say no. Thank you very much.